welcome back to the playground. Welcome to another scary Around the Fire story time. Tonight's story is about Mandy, the haunted doll. Mandy the doll was donated to the Queensland District Museum in British Columbia in 1991. Guests and staff at the museum immediately felt uneasy with her, especially when unexplained activity began to take place around her. The curator of the museum was sitting at her desk when an antique doll was plonked down in front of her. Being donated to the museum was a 90-plus-year-old doll. The donor, stating that it was getting old, was fragile, and she did not want her young daughter playing with it any further and damaging it. The doll, named Mandy, had belonged to the woman's grandmother, but rather than being sad to be parting with what should have been a treasured possession, the woman seemed to be anxious to be rid of it. The curator took hold of the doll and immediately felt uneasy. She chalked the feeling up to the fact that the doll had an incredibly creepy look on it. Its clothing was quite old and faded. The soft, stuffed parts of its body were ripped in places, but most creepy of all was the doll's face. It was realistically painted and had glass eyes, but the forehead over the doll's right eye was cracked, causing the eye to protrude slightly, like it was intently peering at onlookers. Mandy was taken to the museum's workroom to undergo some maintenance before it could be placed on display. The doll was closed in a plastic bag to test whether bugs had infested it. Any infestation would be trapped in the bag. However, placing the doll in plastic bag to the uneasiness of the museum staff felt when they looked at it. Those working in the same room as the doll swore they heard the bag rustle as if the doll had moved inside, and it was not insects causing the movement either. The doll would change positions. After the initial analysis of the doll was complete, it was time to photograph it, a process that all artifacts of the museum undergo for the record books. Mandy was photographed and then left in the lab overnight. The next morning, when staff re-entered the lab, they had found it had been messed up overnight. Smaller objects had been thrown about the room and across the floor. Larger, heavier objects knocked over. This would happen anytime Mandy was left in a room by herself overnight. The curator said the mess is like what would happen if a child had thrown a tantrum in the room. When Mandy was finally placed on display within the museum itself, she was one of the first things visitors would see as they passed the entryway. They would mostly feel uneasy when looking at the doll. There seemed to be something incredibly wrong with it. At times, photographs taken of the doll would not turn out. They would be blurred or have strange light anomalies present in them. It got to the point that the uneasiness felt by the visitors had staff placing Mandy further back in the museum, in her own glass display case. Eventually, a psychic inquired as to whether they could hold the doll, to see what they could pick up. Upon reading the doll, the psychic felt that it had suffered much abuse, but it was not the doll who was suffering, but rather the spirit that inhabits it. What developed from this is an origin story to the spirit inhabiting the doll. This cannot be proven and may be just legend, but it is believed the doll was found in the cellar of an old farmhouse. A man was walking past the farmhouse when he thought he heard some crying coming from within. The odd part about this child's cry was that the passerby knew the farmhouse had been empty, abandoned, so no child should have been there. He walked up the drive and knocked on the door. No answer. The crying continued, so he had to look around. He entered the empty farmhouse and discovered the crying came from below his feet. Not knowing how to access the building's cellar from the inside, he went back outside to find the external entrance. As he opened the storm doors, light illuminated the room, and he made a shocking discovery. The body of a young girl, long dead, lay on the floor, the doll held in her arms. It's not known why the girl was in the cellar in the first place, Whether it was by accident or as some form of crime or punishment, regardless, it is believed that when she died, her spirit decided to inhabit the doll. A horrible story, and no doubt a story you may not believe. However, there's a link between some aspects of the doll's origin and the woman who had donated it to the museum. When strange events surrounding the doll had started to take place at the museum, the curator decided to visit the doll's previous owner. It was here she learnt the truth. The owner had not donated the doll for fear of her daughter breaking it. If that was the sole reason, then she would have just placed the doll in a box and out of reach. No. The real reason was that when the doll was in her house, the woman could hear her crying coming from the cellar. When she would investigate to find the source of the sound, she would find nobody there. The cellar's window would be open and the doll on the floor. When this began to happen more frequently, she decided to get rid of it and donated it to the Quinzel and District Museum. From the very first night that the doll was no longer in her house, the unexplained crying stopped. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this scary Spooktober story time, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now. Love ya.